Hello and welcome to the Story Engine podcast. My name is Kyle Gray, and today on the show we have Brook Bishop. I am so excited to have Brook because we are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics ever, selling high-ticket transformational products and services. And what you're going to discover in this episode is that the process of getting better at selling transformational services is a transformational process in and of itself. It's a way to learn about and learn how to value yourself and the incredible magic that you create. So, without any further ado, let's hand it over to Brook Bishop. Brook Bishop, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
It's stoked to be here.
I am excited to have you on the show. You talk about one of my favorite things, and I'm excited to dive into it. But before we get too much into the nerdy stuff, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're showing up in the world today.
So who I am, a husband and a father and co-founder of an amazing company, having a blast helping lots of people there. But who else am I? Oh man, good philosophical question. You know, it's interesting. I'm one of those people, I love helping others. So in terms of who I am and how I'm showing up in the world, if I can help others who are helping others, then I feel I'm living out my mission.
I love that. Good answer. It's a very broad question, and a lot of people just kind of say what they're doing in business. And it makes sense because a lot of the people that are on this show and listen to this show think a lot about what they're doing in business all of the time. But I appreciate the openness and the opportunities that people take with a question like that and expressing more of who they are. I have a theory that I've been exploring over many of these episodes and many conversations with people, that to get to where you and I are, we are high achievers. And being a high achiever usually means that we discount or undervalue the who we are instead of the what we do or what we know. And being able to really tap into that true value is a powerful thing through story. And I say this now just commending that the conciseness of the answer, but still how broad you really see who you are. And I think that's the sign of a well-balanced, particularly entrepreneur.
No, dude, I agree with you wholeheartedly in terms of the who versus the how piece, right? So much of my life's work has hinged around literally that statement. Since I mentioned kids, being a father, my kids got to grow up with me working from home. And so doing thousands and thousands of calls with clients. Every day they heard me 8 times a day talk about, it's not the how that's the most critical piece, it's the who. And so my son, when he was like 2 years old, he used to talk about that all the time. It's the who, Daddy, it's the who. So,
well, I would love to hear what that means to you in that case, and just like expound on that, how you relate to that specifically.
Yeah. I mean, in the context of how it came up then, at that point in time, I was doing sales heavily for Tony Robbins. And so in exploring with my prospective clients, we'd be digging in on where they were, where they wanted to be, what was getting in the way and what was tripping them up. 99.9% of the time, it was the who piece, right? So many people were asking, how can I get X, Y, Z, or how can I reach this level? And every time we'd get under the hood, and it was really their identity. It was who they saw themselves as, who they believed they were. And that identity drove the bulk of their actions or lack thereof. So that's really where I've spent the bulk of my life, has been, in terms of work side, has really been in helping people cultivate and recalibrate who they see themselves as, because that drives the behavior, which ultimately drives the results.
Mm-hmm. I see this, you say actions, and there's kind of a step before, which is decisions. And I think that being able to appropriately value things impacts the decisions that you make. And I'm curious what realm you see these decisions showing up in. But the realm that I see, at least the first realm that I work with my people in, is making decisions around what goes into a talk. And somebody who is valuing the what and not the who will try and put as much teaching in as possible. They will try and show as much value and as knowledge as possible to overwhelm them so that they seem like there's no other way other than working with them. And when it comes to leaning into the who, it shifts it from what's one thing that we could teach to shift their perspective and being more intentional in that, instead of trying to please this kind of hungry intellect and really just trying to please our own inner critic rather than actually thinking about who's in the audience. where do the decisions manifest in the people that you work with?
Oof, loaded question, man. Good questions. You've done this before. Uh, yeah, man. It's really interesting because in my world, where I see the opposite. I see more indecision than I actually do seeing people make decisions.
Mm,
And the nature of where we come in is so many times I'm witnessing people who want, to your point, they want to put so much information into their world that it actually throttles the capacities of transformation. And we actually had a gal this last month, because we do a lot of support with helping people craft their offering in terms of their actual product offering, right? And so for her, she's got her PhD, and she for 3 years has been spinning around in circles trying to get her program off the ground, because she's trying to figure out, because somebody told her along the way, you need to have an 8-week program for your signature offer. And so she's trying to get a PhD level of knowledge into 8 weeks of course content, and she's just beating her head against the wall. And so for her, there's been this component of indecision of she won't go to the marketplace with her offering. So she's indecisive because the product is not up to par with what she wants to take to the world, because she's thinking she's got to have a PhD in 8 weeks. And so we see oftentimes, more than anything, people get deer in headlights because they don't want to do the wrong thing. Or to the other end of the spectrum, they want to put so much in that
mhm.
it's too big, it's too overwhelming, and so they stop.
I have a joke business, but you can start it if you want. I think you would do well with this one, but it's called Certaholics Anonymous. And these kind of people that you're describing, they will have that program, and they will put something together, and then when it's time to sell it, there's just kind of this nothingness and an uncertainty. And if you've been in a PhD, I miss college. I of course miss my red solo cup parties, and I did it better than most, but I miss once a semester making choices and then having my schedule set for me, and then people told me what success was and exactly how much was required for success and when it would be needed and all of these things, and it was all laid out, and I was very comfortable. And I think that we are like used to that. We were all trained this way for nearly at least 2 decades.
Yep.
And so when we have to enter this different world of entrepreneurship where there's no feedback, there's no clarity, there's no rubric, this emptiness, we start to we want the sense of progress. And a lot of times we'll buy a certification, which will provide here's the structures, and it's an 8-week program. And I know you said this person needed to have a PhD in 8 weeks, but I also think that they would come to the conclusion that maybe they need another certification to add into the tool set, and then things will finally start working.
I agree with you 100%. It's really fascinating because business school, I'll go down this road because, why not?
Mm-hmm.
I believe school has failed us in so many ways, and conditioning us to think that if we just did A, B, we're going to get C, right? And in the world of business, there is not the perfect rubric of if you do A and B, because by the time you figured out A and B, C has already moved off to being E, F, and G. Yeah, for that gal that wanted to have her whole PhD in there, she didn't need to have it in there, but in her mind, she thought she had to. And the reality, and this is why I'm so stoked that you and I are chatting today, the magic is simplicity. And we've all believed that complexity is actually where we're striving for. And so I'm pumped because I'm inside the jar. So to read my own label it's tricky, right? So there's this dynamic where when we're helping other people, there's things for me when I work with my clients, I'm like, oh, this is so easy. Like strip this thing back versus adding to. Let's pull all this crap out. Now in the same breath, hence the reason you and I are having a conversation, I don't even know what I should be pulling out right now because I'm so close to the forest. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So
Mm-hmm.
for coursework, we usually try and help people narrow things down to 2 to 3 maximum outcomes. Even if we can get it down to 1 clear outcome, that's fantastic. But for so many, they want to pack so much in. It's a heavy, heavy, heavy lift. So our whole premise is around, honestly, it's around the identity piece, but it really comes back to this component of mastery. It's like, what if somebody's going to come work with me or come work with our clients? What is the area that you can help them master? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the way more important piece of the puzzle versus learning so much volume.
And so kind of bringing this back into offers, and I think that you've hinted at this with offers, is that instead of adding more tools to the toolbox, it's creating more simplicity and more clarity, which we haven't quite like said this exactly up front, but you help people with high ticket sales is the key to selling a higher ticket offer more easily.
Yeah. And that's why I think so many people put so much into their stage presence, is they have this belief that if they give enough information, people will want to buy what they have. And it's like, if I can just slam more into my 15-minute talk, if I can get 30 minutes into 15 minutes, I'm going to increase the chances of somebody converting. And as you know, because this is what you do, right? Like, that's not how it works. So yeah, for our world, it's really a matter of how can we, from an authentic, heart-centered space, how can we serve people? And by the way, if the person's not the right fit for what we're offering, how can we also graciously let them go and not feel like we're a failure, but also let them know we're going to serve them at the highest level?
Mm-hmm. One of the pathways, and I think this is probably intuitive to you, so this is more for the sake of the listeners and just giving some extra stuff for them. One of the biggest shifts that I see in terms of describing an offer, but this is a habit that I try to cultivate with my people on stages, is I make a distinction between prescriptive and descriptive language. And I discourage prescriptive language. Prescriptive language says what you need to do to get a result. It makes sense that we would talk like this. And when you and I, us nerds, are talking about nerd stuff, we'll talk like that because we are, we're really into this stuff. But when it comes to the stage, what people want and need is descriptive language, describing what they get once they have done the thing. And so many people put emphasis on the prescriptive language versus descriptive. And I think this is also what you're trying to come through in bringing clarities to the offers. And one of the things I'd love to just hear a little bit more about, what do you think you do inside of your process that's different, better, or faster that gets people the result that they're looking for?
Loaded question. It's interesting because I love the prescriptive versus descriptive. In our world, we talk about urban versus lurban. So in terms of geeking out, so we talk about emotional reasons to buy versus logical reasons to buy, right? And if I'm doing the full acronym for anyone who's like, what's the N? So it's emotional reasons to buy now and logical reasons to buy now. So prescriptive usually comes with a position of authority or a self-proclaimed position of authority, right? So there's a superiority that gets put in there. Whereas descriptive actually comes from more of a neutral vantage point, or from our world. If we go, hey, most people are trying to lead with lurban. They're trying to go heavy on logical reasons to buy now, thinking that if I can just logically get through to people, they'll move. Whereas we actually spend like 90% of in a sales engagement, we actually want to be in urban. We want to be in that emotional reason. So to go back a peg, and I wanted to just set a little foundation there before I fully answer your question, because I'm realizing I didn't. One of the big things that we do that really separates from any of the other sales training that might be out there, vast majority of sales training is scriptive or prescriptive, right? So they're going to give you a script. They're going to give you languaging. They're going to say, follow my script. If an objection like this comes up, say these words the way that I say them. We actually don't use scripting. We use structure. But before we even get into structure, we go off of one really critical variable, one critical principle, which is if we don't understand and appreciate the model of the world of the prospect we're speaking to, we have no business influencing them. So a fancy way of saying that is, in order to move somebody, in order to influence somebody, we have to understand and appreciate their model of the world. So we do a lot of work beforehand of figuring out, who is my client? How do they think? How do they make decisions? What does their environment look like? How do they feel? What does a day in their shoes actually look like, feel like, smell like, taste like? And from that vantage point, if we can actually understand their world, that gives us a completely different frame of influence.
One of my favorite questions in this thing, and I think this is how I relate to emotional decisions, is what are their limiting beliefs about the problem they have that I solve that are keeping them from being successful? And a good emotional, persuasive tactic is not to show people how to do it, but to change their beliefs around the problem, and they will naturally start to explore the solution. But if you don't do this and you just are prescriptive, they will immediately tune you out because you haven't addressed the beliefs. And so they will just filter it because the belief system is in play with them.
To your very first question, right? The who. Our identity drives our behavior. So we might tell them how to do things differently. So case in point, we take somebody who's just say somebody who smokes cigarettes. If they have the identity of being a smoker and we tell them logically, if you keep smoking, you're going to get cancer, they're going to flip us the bird and not stop smoking because the identity will dominate the logic, right? The identity of being a smoker is bigger than their will or desire to stop. And that's why the identity always has to be addressed first. And especially with sales, there's so many people we talk to that think sales is a 4-letter word, right? And their identity is, not only am I not a salesperson, I don't want to be a salesperson. So there's a complete aversion to it that's beyond even being the dang thing. So yeah, we have to completely unpack, because our whole piece is we actually want to coach people to yes versus selling people on a product or widget.
Totally. That's the same thing again in presentations. And forgive anybody else listening in, I feel like I'm benefiting a bunch because I'm just getting all of my thoughts validated and I'm feeling all butterflies in my stomach.
Oh, hoorah for alignment.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. This is people stress themselves out and want to like prove themselves on their presentations, and it messes them up. But anyway, so let's bring this back. We've got structure instead of scripts, authentic and emotional ways to sell that are clear and simple is kind of the how. And then speaking of which, since you venerated how good it is to know, what do you think the top 3 problems of your ideal clients are? And lay them out as I just think that these must be very artistically thought out. So let's hear it.
Yeah. So, well, it depends, because if I'm going our overarching client, so sales is a big piece of what we help people do. We really, at the end of the day, our goal is to help people scale their business. So the first and foremost, which we've been, knocking on, which is the identity of being a business owner versus being somebody who's in a position of fulfillment. So that's the first challenge we help solve.
How does that doesn't sound like a problem. I understand the idea and I can logically see the problem, but I don't think somebody would say that they were like, I have this problem in this, my identity's off. What would they say?
They would say they have no freaking clue how to run a business. That would be the problem. Once we unpack it, it's because they're approaching it as an employee thinking that they're going to get business owner results.
They know how to solve a problem. They are an expert, but they don't know how to run a business. If they were a healing person, they would say, I just want to heal people. I don't want to do all this Instagram.
Yeah. Or I'm a coach. I just want to coach people, not realizing you got to have clients. And then, to let go your JOB, you got to have paying clients. Right?
Well, I hate that too, guys. I want you all to know I don't like this truth either. And I've had to work hard and invested in a lot of people like Brook to make this work. Okay, so let's see. Sales is hard and inconsistent. No clue how to run a business, and that probably means, especially since the way that you opened up this misalignment in their business and not being good at sales and not knowing how to run a business is impacting the rest of their lives, and they're not living authentically.
Big one that comes up with that, just if I'm putting sprinkles on it.
Yeah, please.
If they're going to ask somebody to spend big money on them to help them in some capacity, and if they don't know how to go out and generate the clients, and if they are still working a JOB, or if they're caught in that limbo, the messy middle, or if they're not making huge money yet in their coaching business, there's this piece of them that feels like a fraud, because if they're not successful in that business, they therefore label their whole life, I'm not successful. Therefore, the doubt creeps.
So they doubt, why would I charge this high ticket price if I still have a job? Who am I to do this? And then they sabotage their sales process.
Yep. And then we'll see on the flip side too, that can come into play, which is because the bulk of the clients that they've gotten have likely come from referral or word of mouth. And so because referral leads tend to convert at a higher clip, they think that they have this magical offer. And so as soon as they pivot and they try to go generate leads in some other way, and their sales fall off a freaking cliff, they then start to doubt everything yet again, right? Mm-hmm. So referral business, if they have a referral book of clientele, they tend to have high confidence. As soon as they go in for colder leads, whether it's paid advertisements, SEO, paid leads, speaking engagements, whatever it might be, their conversion rate tends to dip quite drastically. and they don't have a system for that side.
Mm. So that's like, yeah, there's so many different things, so many different marketing and gurus out there don't know what to trust. Great. Okay. I want to hear about you now. So I want to read back some of these problems to you. My first step is I want you to feel where these words occur in your body, and then ask yourself, when did I feel just like this? It doesn't have to be the exact factual circumstances, but the emotional circumstances. So sales is hard and inconsistent and not scalable. Every time you get the opportunity to make one of your offers, you somehow sabotage yourself. You feel nervous when you are inviting somebody to spend big money on you, but you feel unworthy of the transformation that you're promising. You've tried so many things before and you don't know what to trust. You work really hard, but at the same time, you're not sure how to run your business right. And the success that you've created takes all of your energy to manage. And now you've forgotten what's made you successful. When have you felt like this?
Ooh. So physically, I'm backwards going into your answer, but felt it in my chest. As far as when I felt that way, when I first started in sales, when I first started in sales was in phone sales. I was petrified to pick up the phone. Literally cried the first day that I was in phone sales. And it was my uncle, it was actually my mentor. He's the one who was like, you got to come and do sales for me. I can totally coach you up. You got this. That first week sucked. The amount of times I got hung up on, the amount of times I had people cursing at me, I literally had somebody, obviously we're rocking headsets now. So back then we had the Plantronics headset for, the phone headset. I had somebody who hit an air horn into the phone. And I was just like, I went nowhere. That first week literally just felt like a complete and utter failure. And sticking with it and getting through the obstacles and finding ways to overcome each of those totally changed that over the course of time. But that was really that initial piece where I felt like there's no way in hell that this is going to happen. To the second part of your question. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Specific rock bottom moment. A Tuesday afternoon.
The rock bottom moment was actually 3 months in and I had made $0. And I literally thought I should go back to waiting tables is literally where my headspace went. And so that was when I went, okay, something has to change. I have to do something different. It was fascinating because I went from, I've got to do it this one way to this one way isn't working. So screw it. I'm going to do the opposite way. And then it started to work. So throwing out.
Before we get into the solutions yet, you're sneaking, Brooke. What room were you in? 3 months have passed and I've made $0. You've had this realization. Are you at your home? Are you at work?
So I was on the second floor, an office space. It was in Carlsbad, California. So there was not a whole lot there. Windows on both sides of the office. And I had my desk and a phone and a list. And at the time, so just to add insult to injury, I was actually selling timeshares to people who had already bought timeshares, and the timeshares didn't work. And so my job was to sell them more. Talk about the shittiest thing ever to try and have to figure out how to sell.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So I'm calling angry people who had spent somewhere between 30 and 50 grand. And my job was to help them come back in and buy them.
Yeah. So I can see how difficult that would be.
First 3 months were not fun. And it was a straight commission gig. That was the other piece.
Okay. And then over time, things started to change. It took a long time. And this was something like a boot camp of the soul for you.
It was good word.
And I assume at least a couple of years, maybe even more. And there's also a time in your life that I would like to hear as specifically of when you know how to run a business and scale in line with what you need, that sales was easy and natural and fulfilling, and you had not only time to enjoy the rest of your life, but capacity to envision your life and be in alignment. Probably when you're maybe sometime around your kids, knowing how you answered the beginning of this podcast. I'm thinking it will have something to do with your kids. One of these moments where you realize, wow, I've really made it and I've mastered this particular process.
So what else can I tell you about the third grade? All right. So it was really interesting because when I was doing sales for Tony, so this was obviously some years later after the timeshares, when I went to work for Tony, I'd come off of a previous job that I actually got fired from. and it was very public and it was very shameful, and I was beating myself up. And I then got this opportunity to go work for Tony. So I got recruited by them. And within that, that first year working for Tony, I went in with a completely different identity, completely different who was captaining the ship. But there's an interesting, I had a completely different drive. There's a different fuel that was behind me on it. What I saw for a lot of the people that were working there, a lot of them wanted Tony's approval, or they wanted to hit numbers, or they wanted the trophy, or the, the significance of hitting a number. And when I went in there, it was fascinating, because at the time I was dating who's now my wife, but I wanted to be able to propose, and I wanted to be able to pay for the wedding, and I wanted to be able to buy the wedding ring, and I wanted to pay for the honeymoon. And I also knew that we were going to want to have kids pretty quick. And I didn't want us to be upside down in debt. And neither of us had parents that were going to be able to contribute to that. And so I had this completely different fuel that was behind going into that sales role. And as such, I was able to completely shake the tree in terms of numbers and production and performance and whatnot. But I went a level deeper. I didn't just want to hit numbers. I wanted to understand how I hit the numbers. And it wasn't going to be enough for me that just me hitting those numbers was going to be satisfactory. I wanted to be able to take what I was doing and help the other people on the team do the same or better. And that's what I was able to do. So I was able to not only unpack things, but I was able to transfer it and teach others that were on the team how to do it. And we were able to scale a division from about $1 million a year to about $40 million a year in 2 years' time. In wanting to understand it at such a deep level, it wasn't just the sales piece, though. I wanted to know the whole business. And that was the magic, because I got to unpack in an environment with somebody who had standards like Tony. I got to unpack how he managed and ran his businesses. So I got to use his marketing budget and play.
And how did you propose after all that?
How did I propose? I got to pay for the ring in cash. I got to pay for the wedding in cash. You want to know like the specifics of like
I want to know the specifics
the actual day?
The proposal. Yes.
Dude, it was scarier than shit. Are you married, by the way? Scary. Proposing. It was so funny because we were together for like 4 years. So you wouldn't think that it'd be scary, but it was scary. I actually let her do a day of choose your own adventure. So I had like 10 different things that we could do in the day. And I let my wife pick. So this way she had no idea what was coming. So I'm like, hey, where do you want to go have breakfast? Like, we're going to do a full day of adventures. So I let her pick breakfast. And then I'm like, hey, after breakfast, do you want to go, do you want to go up to do you want to go up to the aquarium? There's this cool marine biology institute back where I used to live. Like, do you want to go to the tide pools? Do you want to go do these things? So I started to lay out all these different adventures we could do through the course of the day. All of it rounded up with, we ended up at the restaurant we had our first dinner at, on our very first date, having sunset, and we were down on the beach. And so in her mind, she's like, oh, she's been picking all these adventures. So clearly I have no plan for the day. And as soon as the sun was setting, we were in the spot that we actually had our first date, not our very first date, but our first date in California at that point. And yeah, so that's where I got to pop the question. I was nervous as all hell. What was rad, I didn't want to, so kind of going back to that superior, inferior conversation, I didn't want to do the whole inferior piece of getting down on my knee in the traditional sense. And so it was really cool that like God, the universe, divinely put us in a position where actually, instead of me getting down on my knee, I got to lift her up and put her on the seawall. And so I got to stand up, and at the same time I got to elevate her. So there's kind of this cool piece of what's the word I would look for? Almost like this metaphor for how we got to live going forward. Yeah, got to raise her up, and I didn't have to go inferior in order to do it.
Great detail. Would you like to hear your story?
Heck yeah, dude. And I'm like sitting here going, what pieces are you putting together over there?
I've never felt more like a total and utter failure than I did in my first sales job. It was a boot camp from hell. I was young, down on my luck, didn't have too many skills, and my uncle called me in and said, hey, I can coach you into this, and roped me into my first high-ticket sales opportunity, selling timeshares to people who had bought timeshares and the timeshares didn't work out. People who were automatically prone to hate me. And the thing is, I already hated myself. And so every time this would show up on the calls, I would be nervous that this person would get mad, and they were naturally mad. Sometimes they would put up an air horn to the phone. Sometimes they would hang up on me so many times. And after 3 months, I hadn't made any money. And I started to think to myself, maybe I should just go back to waiting tables. This idea of having like a good job in sales that pays me well and that I can grow into is just a fantasy. But I knew that something needed to change. And I needed to understand what was happening in this sales process. And I knew that it wasn't just me, but it wasn't just the sales that I was doing, but my relationship with myself. And over the course of so many calls, so many costly and painful mistakes, I started to transform myself. Years later, this became one of my greatest strengths. I found myself working for Tony Robbins, and I had worked on and developed a process for sales that was flexible, that created structure instead of scripts, that were authentic ways to showcase my value, that were clear and simple and let me feel in alignment with myself. And now I'm here among some of the greatest salespeople in the world at Tony Robbins. Some people want Tony Robbins approval. Some people want to hit the big numbers and get the big prizes. And I have a totally different goal. I'm here to sell. But also, right next to me in the sales team is my soon-to-be wife. And I want to be able to propose in an amazing way. I want to have a honeymoon and be able to pay for the wedding. And I didn't want us in debt. And this had to come completely from me. And in a few months of just nailing it, I went deeper. And I wanted to understand what I was doing. I wasn't just hitting numbers, and it wasn't just a script, but it was something inside of me, the right motivation, the right energy, and the right who that I was being. And I can remember not too much later taking my wife out on a choose your own adventure day, asking her, where do you want to go to breakfast? Okay, let's go. Do you want to go to the aquarium next or tide pools? And it all rounded up one evening at the restaurant where we had our first dinner at. The sun was just setting, and we were in our spot where we had our very first date and dinner. And instead of dropping down on one knee and popping the question, I lift her up onto the seawall and seeing that orange golden light reflected on her face. And I proposed to her, and seeing how she lit up, just like that sunset, made me so grateful. It's one of my fondest memories. And I was so grateful for the process of sales, this thing that once was the scariest, hardest, most painful thing, and thing that made me almost want to give up on it all. And because of it now, I was able to create this moment and this life and the start of a beautiful life with my new wife. And for many of you out there, you're trying to sell your things just like I was. And it's very, very difficult and complicated. And I'm here to show you a better way to do that today.
Freaking legit.
There you go. Absolutely.
You're pretty good at what you do, my friend.
It's structures. You can.
I was just going to say deconstructing. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's very similar to the process that you described applied in a slightly different format.
No, it's cool. In the back of my mind too, I'm like, oh yeah, people want to be seen, heard, and understood. And there's also the magic of the process that you do, because somebody going through it's going to go, oh shit, you get me.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I'm a tricky one. I'm a tricky one in here. You're seeing the deep secret magic that's happening.
No, it's dope.
Well, it's been a blast taking you through this process on the show today. And right now's the time. Do you have any closing thoughts for us? And where can we go to learn more about you?
Closing thoughts, dude. Thank you first and foremost for taking the time to unpack things. Yeah, it does feel good to be inside the jar and have somebody else reading the label. As far as, if anybody wants to know more about what we do, empirepartners.net is our home. So empirepartners.net. Or you can go to brookbishop.com. If you want to see my sexy pictures, that's where they're at. But no, there's no sexy pictures. But man, thank you again for bringing your brilliance to the table and for helping people in this way, dude. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Brook Bishop, thank you so much for joining us today on the Story Engine Podcast.